Hi, friends.
Hey, everybody.
Oh my gosh. So fun. We have a big crowd today, which is wonderful. So grateful, so grateful. And we are jam-packed with some great speakers. We're incredibly lucky today. I first want to start off by introducing you guys to Sarah Kuchenbecker, who is joining us as a special co-host because Jennifer Serlin, sorry, not Jennifer Serlin, Jennifer McDowell. I don't know about you guys. Do you have too many Jennifers in your life a little bit? I love
Or
all the
Sarah's.
Jennifers, but I've got about five.
Yeah.
So Jennifer McDowell is out of the country, and Sarah has been a godsend for me, and also all of the Scottsdale Women Rising efforts. And has, if you guys have been reading the newsletter, she's been all over those. She's been a rock star. I will tell you, in the world of politicos, this girl is a rising star. So Sarah's going to be our co-host today. And so thank you, Sarah, for joining us.
Well, thanks, Shay, for that wonderful introduction. Really excited to be here. I've attended a bunch of these and I'm excited to get to host with this one. We have so many interesting topics today. So, yeah.
We really do. We truly do. So very last minute, we actually decided to have on a wonderful person. We have Beth Lewis, who is the executive director of Save Our Schools Arizona.
Mhm.
And it was absolutely mandatory that we bring her on because we have a big win to celebrate. And considering the fact we've had a lot of very frustrating things going on, we really have to celebrate these wins. And so she was willing to jump on between other interviews and such. So thank you so much, Beth. Tell us what we are celebrating.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, ladies. Yeah, it's not often that I get to come on and say good news about public education and funding in Arizona. So exciting. We had a historic victory yesterday. So many of you know that there's been a school facilities lawsuit that has been in court for 8 years. And yesterday, the Maricopa County Superior Court ruled that Arizona schools are, with beyond the shadow of a doubt, inadequately and inequitably funded. Something that I think we all know. Anybody who is a parent or an educator or, volunteer in our schools absolutely knows this to be true, but it's really important that the courts are saying that. A little bit of history. So that suit was brought back 8 years ago by the AEA, the Arizona School Boards Administration or Association, the Arizona School Administrators, and then multiple school districts. And so they worked together for many, many years. And the lawyer on the case was Danny Edelman. I want to give him his flowers because Danny is just the best of the best of the best. And he works for a group called Arizona Center for Law in the Public Interest. And they are an amazing organization that does pro bono work for lots of great causes, including our public schools. So it took forever. And it was a 114-page order. And it was, all of the evidence that proves that our schools are dramatically underfunded. At the very end, it called for a permanent injunction. Now, it will, and that's the best news, like the best case possible, which never happens for schools in our courts. So amazing. Just so you all know, it will probably go through an appeals process. Unfortunately, so it's going to take a little while. And then ultimately, I think that the courts will probably kick this to the legislature and say, hey, legislature, you have to do something about this. And so then we may see like a settlement or something with Governor Hobbs in the next year or two. So
That
really
is
exciting.
phenomenal. Thank you so much for all your work. And I will say, so help us understand, is that a certain amount of money that we will then expect to see, or is that we don't have a cap anymore? Or what does that kind of look like
That's a
if it were to not be appealed and it actually comes to fruition?
That's a great question. I mean, a lot of the case kind of hinged upon the fact that because the state legislature is not providing enough funding, it's forcing local schools to go out for like bonds and overrides, and that it's created a patchwork system. And because of their failure to fund schools, whereas our Constitution says that we have to provide a general and uniform public education system. So they're probably going to have to make some sort of settlement to say, hey, all of these districts that aren't able to get bonds and overrides, or maybe like certain, they're going to have to make this equitable. They're going to have to create a fund to make sure that school facilities are safe, that our students are safe, that our buildings are not falling apart. Which, you know, those capital needs are really important to make sure not only that people are taken care of, but also that kids can learn. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to remind you guys that myself and some other great people on this Zoom here ran the overrides for 2022 and 2023. Those brought us just over something around the line of $37 million for Scottsdale schools. So when you think, oh, our schools aren't falling apart. Oh, our schools, what are they talking about? What we experience here in Scottsdale, Arizona is not the same thing that the rest of Arizona experiences. We pass overrides. Our voters vote, not always. We've actually lost quite a few in the last decade, but we typically pass overrides, we pass bonds. That is why our schools are not falling apart. And that's why we have a really high quality of education here in Scottsdale. But please understand that we're on this Zoom, we're not the kind of people that go, well, as long as my kid's fine, I don't care about the others. We care about all students, and there is no such thing as other people's kids. So the work that SOS does, Save Our Schools Arizona, is amazing, amazing work. And I do want to give a shout out, of course, to Arizona Center for the Law and the Public Interest. Danny Edelman, we actually had him on probably maybe 2 months ago. Be sure and check our YouTube page and our podcast to listen to him. I will just tell you, I actually do not donate to any nonprofits any longer. I, of course, work a lot with donating to candidates, but the only nonprofit that I donate to, well, actually I do with SOS. I do some with SOS, but Arizona Center for the Law and the Public Interest, they are our next line of defense when nonsense is going down at the legislature. You know, instead of picking up all this mess that they do, they come in and, again, pro bono, will find lawsuits that will affect the greatest number of people, not just about education, about quality of water and air. And they take on the work to say, nope, not on our watch. And so they're our second best line of defense. So grateful for the work that they do. Thank you, Beth, for joining us. I appreciate you so much. And next we have on a very special guest, my own hubby, Dr. Kaveh Najafi. He is director of a trauma program here, and he's fellowship trained trauma surgeon, also a critical care intensivist, and he's an all-around badass. That's what I'm going to have to tell you guys. He is an all-around absolute badass. So Kaveh, thank you for joining us. And here, introduction to Sarah, because you haven't got to meet Sarah just yet. So,
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi,
Okay,
everybody
Kaveh,
else.
I have a burning question before we get started.
Sure,
Kaveh.
absolutely.
What's it like to be married to Shay? So, to come home and have your house full of political people that she is drumming up support for. What's that like?
I will tell you, we work at a level 1 trauma center, so we see kind of the worst of the worst, and it's often less stressful here than it is at our home.
He is a good sport. He is often, making all the drinks and the cocktails and then gets called out or comes home after a long 24-hour shift and comes home to like a house full of people. He is a very, very good sport about all of our different events that we hold here. So thank you, honey.
To be honest, it's actually super duper cool. We kind of both feed off of service and helping other people. So I get a chance to do that here, and then Shay gets to do a chance to do that there. So it's pretty awesome to kind of be a part of all of it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, honey. Well, Sarah, I feel like I was going to be like, Kaveh, tell them about this part. Tell them about this part. So I just thought, why don't I we'll let Sarah kind of lead a little bit. So,
Okay.
Sarah, how do you want to kick this off?
Well, I wanted to ask Kaveh, I know you've been a practicing physician for a number of years, and you've kind of more recently transitioned into an administrative role. I know you're still practicing, but you're also kind of seeing the bigger picture. And I wanted to know what made you decide to do that, and why did you want to pick up that baton?
Great question. It's really about the team. So I work with some fantastic individuals. They're very highly skilled. And at the time, I was the associate trauma medical director, so I had a boss, and just kind of was really working with team relations and building team stuff. And he was kind of in charge of all of the oversight and how the other things run. And then that changed, and he was let go. So they said, "Hey, can you take over?" And it was kind of just a natural progression. It was, just a way to advocate for the team and to kind of keep things going forward. And it's been a different experience. Learning how to work with other services and other folks in the hospital and trying to be mindful of budgets and how to show what budgets mean. So that's kind of what led me to be able to kind of talk with like our administration and our executives and because we're trying to plan for hospitals with this stuff coming. And so, you get pulled into those conversations about expansion and growth and what this means and what we're anticipating. And when I ask for the latest and greatest and newest stuff, why I can't have it is because, we're trying to save money. So it's been an eye-opening experience because it's not just the patient care stuff. It's kind of the inner workings and functioning of a hospital and the business management side of a hospital, which is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's actually such a great segue. Now that you have some of this experience, you can tell us what are we going to be dealing with over the next 2 to 3 years as these Medicaid cuts come and hit our state and our city.
Yeah. First, a little disclaimer. These are my personal views that have obviously been discussed with a lot of other folks and the higher ups, but I can't necessarily say the hospital feels the same, but I will say the system I work for is incredibly patient forward. And so I've actually had a ton of support preparing for this talk from the higher ups and other things. So another disclaimer is that I am a trauma guy, so I will try to keep language PG, but no promises.
Not necessary, not necessary with this group.
Not knowing for having a really functional frontal lobe, I don't really think about things that come out of my mouth first. So we'll talk about that. But I think the best way to kind of go about it is kind of break it up a little bit and kind of explain why to folks on this particular Zoom, how they may be affected or why it may be important. And so kind of the first way to look at it is how does it affect Medicaid in particular? We're talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I guess, and how that affects locally, what that means to Medicaid in and of itself. Okay, great. How does that affect me? And then what about hospitals? How does it affect hospitals? Okay, great. How does that affect me? And then what does it actually mean to something that's really important to me? Because we're a big teaching institution. What does that mean to medical students and residents and the future of medicine and the future doctors that we're trying to get prepared, right? So, and then also, of course, what does this do to our Affordable Care Act? So there's a couple of different things. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff in the bill, but there's a lot of stuff I think important in that ways. So just to kind of go over Medicaid, Medicare, just so people understand, Medicare is for folks who are 65 and older. It's usually government standardized, equal copays across the country nationally. Medicaid, however, is for qualifying for folks who are low income, mothers, children, any age of people that are of disabilities, families, all that stuff. And it's primarily controlled by the state. So it varies, eligibility varies per state, and benefits vary per state, I should say. So across the country, about 72 million Americans are insured under Medicaid. With these changes that we see coming, we're expecting it to drop from 72 to about 60 million. And then anticipate with changes to the Affordable Care Act is probably another 3 to 5 million. So we're roughly talking about 15 million people who are about to be uninsured. There is some, misinformation out there. I'm sure that you guys are aware of that. Depends on how your feed goes. But there are some folks who just say, no, this is great. This is really going to cut the fat and lean the stuff off and cut credits. And then everyone else thinks that we're definitely doomed and we're all going to die. And I think that the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think we're definitely going to have some cuts to waste, but I think we're also kind of all doomed. So
I told him last night, I said, Javi, because he's such a great presenter and his residents love him. And I said, what, are you going to put some funny stuff in? He's like, I don't think I can. So I said, I should have warned you guys, we're going to need a stiff drink after this. Go ahead.
And I don't necessarily think that. It's just if you're thinking about it from our perspective, right? This is kind of, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know 100% yet, but these are stuff that we're actively trying to plan for. Let's say worst case scenario, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? So these are some of the things that we're looking at, I'll say. So this new bill is going to cut $1 trillion out of the healthcare industry. So that's a lot of zeros. In particularly in Arizona, our Medicaid is called Access. So that's Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System. So we shorten that to Access. We serve about 2 million folks in Arizona. As of January 2025, there was a vote by Prop 204 to expand those benefits to include what we call childless adults who meet 100% of the federal poverty level. And so the federal poverty level is different a little bit for the 48 states and then different for Alaska and Hawaii. But here, for a single person at the 100% poverty level is about $15,000 per year income, and $32,000 for a family of 4. And it's this expanded group of the Access folks that is at most risk now, mostly because that's where all those changes and things are coming about. And one of the biggest one is called redetermination. So each year you'd have to apply for benefits by showing your income, showing what's going on, showing your disabilities. That's now moved from 1 year to 6 months. And so to continuously try to keep up for 6 months, you just kind of get lost in paperwork. And also the folks that are at these facilities trying to assist you in getting that paperwork done has also been cut. So now it's more paperwork with less assistance. And then the second part is work requirements. So we don't really know what the work requirements will become because it says work requirements for able-bodied adults. So we don't know what able-bodied means, right? Is that someone who's undergoing cancer treatment? Is that somebody who's, healing from trauma with multiple extremity injuries? Is this
Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's? Is this mental illness? What defines that? And that becomes really important later for the Affordable Care Act, because under the Affordable Care Act now, if you fail to qualify for Medicaid for the work restrictions, you are now no longer eligible to apply for anything in the Affordable Care Act. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. It's really kind of nasty. So how does this apply to us in Scottsdale? All right, maybe I'm not on Medicaid, maybe I am. We obviously know from our public schools that there are a lot of folks on free and assisted meals. So this does affect our community tremendously, right? And the hard part is once—
I want to interject real quick. We
Yeah.
do have 9 Title I schools in Scottsdale. People don't realize that. So when you think about Scottsdale being so incredibly wealthy, remember, we do have low income in South Scottsdale at a much higher percentage than people realize. But of course, also we're looking at a big picture of CD1 and your full encapsulation area that you bring in and affects our hospitals. So continue.
Yeah, very true. What happens now, though, especially if all these folks who are on Medicaid lose insurance, they really lose that incentive to have preventative care, right? So now nobody's seeking out preventative care or healthy pregnancies or anything like that, and so we kind of wait until things get really, really bad. And so then they're going to come to the hospital when things are pretty dire or things are worse or more severe, and we've not done any preventative care. And what happens now is that the ERs now become the primary care offices, so that when you guys need to go to the ED, it's packed and your wait times are hours and hours and hours. And those resources traditionally that would have been attended to as a primary care or preventative care are now being taken care of the ED. And so those resources and availabilities are now being bottlenecked right there. How
Oh, I
else?
just wanted to jump in real
Sure.
quick with just some numbers to understand when we're talking about preventative care, that we're talking like private practice, individuals, chiropractor, all sorts of different medical things that people seek out to keep themselves healthy. And for CD1, we're looking at cuts about $180 million of money that is paid through Medicaid for preventative care right now that will just be going away. So it's not just hospitals that'll be impacted, it's these private practices that are also going to be losing patients and money as well.
And CD1 is congressional district 1, so
Oh,
essentially Scottsdale and areas that stretch out around Scottsdale, that is considered congressional district 1. And so that's often how we put things in terms. And more than likely his
Thank
encaption area at his specific hospital probably encompasses that area possibly. So that's going to affect our community as a whole outside of Scottsdale.
Yeah. And then kind of the next thing to look at is now we've talked about those folks and what they can do and how now we're in the ER. So how are these cuts going to affect hospitals? Right. And so Medicaid reimburses hospitals and physicians by two things called the Medicare, I had to write it down, Medicaid provider assessment and state directed payment programs. And these are essentially the vehicles that are used to reimburse hospitals and physicians and staff for the care that they give. It's traditionally obviously lower. It's 80 cents-ish per dollar, of care. And that will probably drop to the low 70s, or even into the 60s. So now we're talking about cutting, again, $1 trillion out of the healthcare budget. It amounts to approximately $8 billion in Arizona alone across the state. Just talking with some of my superiors is that we're estimating in the next 5 years, our system alone is standing to lose about $225 million. So what does that mean? All right. So, all right, hospitals aren't making money, doctors aren't making money. Fine. That's all right. But the hard part is that this also applies to rural hospitals, right? And so rural hospitals operate on much smaller margins, meaning that a great percentage of their patients are on Medicaid. So if they lose coverage, they lose reimbursement, those rural hospitals will end up closing. And then those folks now will also still have to seek care and come here. So now we're talking about more and more folks who are uninsured will have to come to a tertiary center like ours to receive care. So again, we're talking about adding more and more patients to treat, and less funds to be able to do that. What that also means, though, is that without that income and losing money, hospitals are going to be less likely to expand, less likely to offer more and more things, less likely to be able to cover different things. So that means not the newest CT scanner or the surgical robot. We're less likely to kind of try to keep expanding and hire more and more.
But that's okay because we're not a growing county, right? We're not the number 1 growing county.
I'm not a real estate agent because I'm not very smart, and that's what I should have done. But trajectory for Maricopa County is that's usually in like the top 5 of in what do I call it? In-state domestic migration, I guess is what you can call it. So lots of people moving from other states to here. It's consistently in the top 5. And so there's more and more folks coming to Arizona. So our populations are increasing, which is a good thing, but to take into account for what's happening now. Excuse me. The other hard part that we deal with Medicaid is that Medicaid is responsible for helping us pay for our discharges to what we call short-term nursing facilities or rehab facilities. So without coverage, these folks who may not be able to afford care will now have to stay in the hospital longer until they're healed, rather than, their acute care setting is complete and then they'd have to go to this nursing facility or rehab facility. That will no longer be an option. So how does that apply to me again, right? So now you're going to the ED. It's completely packed. The wait times are ridiculous. There's older facilities, not the newest, latest, greatest stuff. The people that are in the hospital already are pretty sick. They're going to be stuck there for longer, and there's not a lot of resources for somebody else.
Because a hospital will not move someone out, even if they know they're not getting payment. I mean, that's my understanding. They will always serve someone, even if they know there's zero chance that they're going to get payment.
From the hospital, everybody gets treated regardless of ability to pay. So nobody's ever turned away for that reason. And so those folks stay here, and that potentially causes that second bottleneck there. So we're looking at stacking and really kind of a stress of resources. And we know this happens because we saw it very clearly in COVID. We have the largest ICU in the state, and so we had a lot of folks who are in our ICU during COVID at that time. And we saw that folks that we had no hospital beds left over and nobody could come in. And so people with heart attacks and MIs and strokes had to potentially go somewhere else or tough it out at home. And so we see those things. We start to have to triage different things of who's the sickest and who can come in and who can't. So it becomes a very very dicey, dire situation. I think the last kind of part to all this is what does this mean on medical students and residents and that thing? What about future doctors? How are we going to keep doing that? So currently in this bill, there is a cap on federal loans of $200,000, and it's an aggregate, meaning that not just for each section. So if you use some federal money for undergrad and then grad school and then medical school, it's capped at $200,000. Well, medical school in and of itself is anywhere between $200,000 to $300,000. So how do you pay for school now? It's going to be through third parties, right? And so those interest rates are astronomical. They've also taken away deferment programs while you're a resident. So resident means that you go to undergrad, then you go to medical school, and then once you decide what you want to do, what kind of doctor you want to be, you have to go through extra training. It's called a residency. They're usually 3 to 4 years long. Mine was much longer, but it does take, so you get to defer because you do get paid as a resident, but it's about $50,000 maybe. And that's kind of across the nation, right? So now we're asking these folks to not only take on more and more debt, but then now to have to start paying it back much more earlier than we're used to. It also, right, so now we're thinking, well, who's going to go to medical school? Well, it's going to be rich people, right? So now we're just increasing that inequity in medicine, which we already see. And so these, these first generation students, kids from underserved areas, underrepresented areas won't be coming to school. I definitely couldn't have afforded to go to medical school if this was in place right now. And so, we're just kind of narrowing down an already smaller and smaller workforce. So if we're asking folks, hey, we really want you to continue to go into medicine, we ask you to take on a lot more debt and you're going to have to pay it back sooner. And then when you get out, we're not going to be able to pay you and you're going to have to work in these smaller hospitals. Oh, and the training programs are going to be less because hospitals are going to have to thin down a little bit and we may not have those opportunities for you to be in the hospital. So it makes a pretty bleak situation for the future of medicine from a teaching standpoint as well. So, we kind of talked a little bit about there's going to be more and more patients kind of using the hospital as the place they get care, and there's going to be less resources and docs to take care of them. And so that's kind of the overview of kind of what we're looking at and how do we fix that.
So I know that, so you go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I just wanted to jump in with one other input that I think is important. So we're talking higher wait times, we're talking longer stays, we're talking less equipment, we're talking less ability to train people, and we're also talking less ability to run clinical trials in hospitals. Those are huge, take a lot of resources, and so we're cutting funding from the NIH, which is not in this bill, but other executive orders cutting funding. And then even if something gets to the clinic and it's going to move forward into a hospital, we can't necessarily give you access to that clinical trial because there isn't the staff there to run it. So there could be some new experimental drug that you could take for, say, a stroke that can't be implemented because the hospital doesn't have the resources to do that. Just my husband is in medical research and biotechnology, and this is a huge thing that they are facing as well, trying to get drugs in that could help all of us, just without resources to do it.
Yeah. I'm sure he's too, because we do quite a bit of research. We have some Department of Defense grants and stuff that we work with. And it was pretty incredible how we had to state what our objectives were, because there was definitely keywords in there that would be thrown out. So if you said, for example, how does trauma affect the male sex versus the female sex, automatically that gets rejected when it has nothing to actually do with anything but gender, how trauma engenders science. So there was a lot of studies we had to revamp and reword, to your point.
Insanity. Am I right? Is that absolute insanity? I mean, you're affecting the quality of this research and how you have, it's insane.
And to Sarah's point, that's how we do medicine. Medicine is always based off of what we call evidence-based results. And so long gone are the days of, oh, I do it like this because, my attending taught me this and his attending taught me that. So now we're 80 years later doing something that somebody thought of, a long time ago. So really we do all of our medical management based on clinical trials, based on the latest and greatest evidence and kind of all those things. And so it's a huge impact to healthcare.
So I was going to say that, I think a lot of people, let's acknowledge, we're in Scottsdale. Majority of people that's in our community have private insurance. And in their head, they're thinking, I'm going to be fine. I've got this great relationship with my cardio doctor. I've got this great relationship with this doctor. I'm going to be just fine. I've got insurance. But can you help explain? And maybe you did a little bit, but maybe a little bit more in depth of like, how is the privately insured? How are we going to be affected?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the hospitals can't run on no money, right? So they will take their losses and try to apply them to the commercial insurances. And those commercial insurances also can't run on no money. So they're going to pass them on as premiums. So premiums will start to go up higher and higher and higher. So that's how that will affect all the private insurances for sure.
But we'll all be getting checks back from the government now that we've skimmed the fat, and right, we'll be actually getting those checks to apply to our deductibles, right?
There was a $50 billion grant to try to offset the taking away of $1 trillion. So lots of zeros, but 50 billion is not a whole lot of $1 trillion. So
No, it's not. So many great points. Thank you so much. Sarah, did you have any further questions for Kaveh?
Is there anything we can do?
Don't get on a motorcycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Try to stay out of the ER.
So it should be pointed out, these changes won't take effect till 2027. So nothing is right now. It's not tomorrow. It's not next month. You have a little bit of time. People can still apply and get on access and Medicaid, and you still have time to do things. So it's not quite yet. Potentially, midterms come around the same time. Speak to senators and your congressmen, your representatives, and try to make changes. There's still a lot of stuff out there that's pretty nebulous within the bill. So potentially there could be some leeway different places. So that could be potentially much better. That's the answer is
Like, I know. Ask
really
my wife.
don't.
What do we do?
Yeah, that's why we're bringing it to y'all, so that you can try to figure it out and get some stuff done, because we're just busy here trying to I told Jay last night, I was like, the analogy is kind of like we're all on the Titanic, but we know it's coming, so what can we do to avoid that iceberg? And so that's what we're trying to do, because there's lots of potential pitfalls for it. But I think one thing that we will say right now, especially for my particular network, is that patient care won't ever suffer just for the money. And so we're very patient care forward. We're very focused on patient care, and patient care outcomes will always be at the forefront of whatever we do, regardless of how finances look.
Are all hospitals nonprofit? So their goal is not necessarily to make their stockholders.
I would say a majority. That is a question I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Our network is nonprofit. I can't speak to some of the others.
So this is not going into effect until midterms. Surprise, surprise. I'm just wondering, everything else we're glad it's not going into effect. But let's be honest, there was a reasoning why they're going to have this happen after the midterms. But I would imagine hospitals are already at some point not doing, having hiring freezes, or again, not necessarily expanding, or being incredibly cautious about expanding. And so there's got to be a certain buildup that we're going to start experiencing now?
Yeah, I mean, we were already having steering committees based on, what are we doing? Are we going to really do this? Do we want to expand that? Are we going to have a heart program at this hospital? Are we not? We're going to wait. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely talking about selectively expanding or improving programs that are currently in existence, and what do we want to do for other ones? So, it's all kind of a budgeting, guessing game right now, trying to figure out what we think will really happen. And again, this isn't 100% all the stuff that will happen. This is from a perspective of being in healthcare, kind of what this means when you start taking out all the money, and what does it start to do. So it's really not, I did tell Shay that it was Titanic and this stuff, and it's terrible. And I tell medical students don't go into medicine and blah, blah, blah. But the answer is, um, we never know 100%, right? And this is something that's going to affect us all. And this is something that's going to be really important to all of us. And there will still be folks who primary service is to give back and to serve other people, regardless of interest rates and costs and that kind of stuff. So, myself included. So I think you'll still see, the better side of humanity will prevail in this situation.
Okay. I know we have some great questions, and I will say, I will try to get to your questions after, get you some answers. However, we do still have a few other speakers, so I want to give time for that. Dr. Najafi, we're so glad you joined us. Thank you
for
so
having me.
much.
Yeah.
We appreciate you. And for those of you who have been to any of our Civic 101 happy hours and enjoyed Kave's famous Palomas, can we give a shout out for Kave, because we love him, and all he does for our events. He's the best bartender ever. And now we actually wanted to, and Kave was going to speak a little bit about vaccines, but he is a humble enough physician to say, why don't we bring on an expert? And we happen to know one. So we have Ashley Chambers, who's actually a Scottsdale Women Rising member, proud member. And so we appreciate her and love her. And she is, I'm going to pull up her bio real quick. So, because she's the shit. She's a proud Scottsdale Women Rising member, executive director at Arizona Families for Vaccines, focusing on building a grassroots pro-vaccine movement. Ashley also serves as American Families for Vaccines Director of Legal Affairs. So thank you so much, Ashley. Tell us a little bit about what you are experiencing in the world of medicine and what you are working towards right now, and the challenges we're going to be facing.
Yeah, thanks for letting me come on. I'm really happy to be here. Just a little bit about my organization. So we're a state chapter of a national nonprofit called American Families for Vaccines, and we have one lane, and that's pro-vaccine political advocacy. So we're really focused on policymakers, not so much in getting individuals vaccinated. We leave that to physicians and those in the medical field. But we try to educate policymakers to make the best policy that increases access and confidence in vaccines. Right now, I think legislatively, we're seeing a lot of issues with lawmakers who are not qualified, and they are instituting policies that are really dangerous to community immunity. And when we talk about community immunity, as just a background for everybody on the call, we mean that in order for vaccine preventable diseases to not be circulating in your community, there needs to be a high percentage of uptake in your population. So for example, the measles disease, which is the most contagious disease that we have right now, requires a 95% community uptake of that vaccine to not have measles circulating. When you dip below 95%, that's when you start to see pockets of measles coming up. And that's why we're having this measles outbreak in our country, because nationwide, our population uptake has decreased dramatically as a direct result of vaccine misinformation and vaccine policies. So just generally speaking, when we talk about vaccine policy, traditionally, that was something based in the states. So for example, the Arizona legislature comes up with school vaccine requirements. So in Arizona, we have both religious exemptions for daycare and preschool, and we have personal belief exemptions for K through 12. All you have to do is sign a form that says, due to either your religious beliefs in daycare or due to your personal beliefs in K through 12, that you don't want to vaccinate your kids against these common childhood diseases, measles, polio, diphtheria, etc., hepatitis, all those things. So that is state policy. Nationwide, we are now seeing a focus towards federal vaccine policy, because federally, they create the vaccine infrastructure for delivery of vaccines and for creating the program that provides free vaccines all over the country. And the committee that comes up with vaccine recommendations and the committee that comes up with insurance policies for childhood vaccines is called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. ACIP is what we call it. And the Secretary of HHS is in charge of ACIP. Many of you know that Secretary Kennedy, famous anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist, is now the Secretary of HHS. What he has done recently that you may have heard about is replaced all of the people that comprise this Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, fired them all, and replaced them with people that he likes. It's not a shock that the overwhelming majority of them have made off-the-wall comments about not just the COVID vaccine, but childhood vaccines in general, and are just completely unqualified. The big knock on what Secretary Kennedy has said, and the reason why he replaced the ACIP committee, is because they had ties to the pharmaceutical industry. Well, of course, you're going to want to have people who have operated within that system and know how vaccines are made, know how the science is done, are researchers or physicians themselves. Of course, you're going to want those people monitoring other people of the similar ilk. You're not going to want an outsider coming in who has no idea about the FDA regulatory process or how science is conducted or how patient care is given. You're not going to want those people to run that department. So the people that he has now are quite frankly very dangerous in terms of who's running the show now. And I hope I'm not talking too much, but I think it's important for you guys to understand what ACIP does. So ACIP comes up with the recommendations that when you go to your pediatrician for your kiddos, or when you go for your 65th wellness check, your pediatrician is making vaccine recommendations based off of what these people have said is important to you. So not only is it affecting your individual recommendations on what your doctor is supposed to be telling you, but now it's also going to be affecting your insurance coverage and the vaccine supply chain. And I'll explain those two things because they're a little bit different. Any vaccine that is in this ACIP recommended program is required to be covered by insurance, both commercial insurance and Medicaid, Medicare insurance. So when you go to your doctor and he recommends, and the ACIP committee recommends that you get your hepatitis B vaccine, the reason that it's covered by your insurance is because it's required to be covered by insurance. And the problem with this advisory committee is they are anti-vaccine skeptics. So one by one, they're going to start pulling vaccines from this ACIP recommendation. That means your private insurance doesn't have to cover it anymore. Or if they do cover it, they can decide you're going to need a $50 copay. You're going to need a $100 copay when you get your vaccines. Dangerous. And that will personally affect people who are on private insurance. The other thing that's super important is that it's going to affect people who get free vaccines. The Vaccines for Children program is a long-established program which any vaccine that is under the ACIP recommendations is free for underinsured kids, uninsured kids, because the goal is to get community immunity. The goal is to not only prevent harm from coming to a child who's unvaccinated, but to make sure that the population level rises to community immunity so that if you get cancer and you're going through chemo, everybody else is protected so that diseases aren't circulating in the population. And we have a large number of kiddos in Arizona and nationwide that get their vaccines through the Vaccines for Children program. And if you're a poor mom who's struggling to put food on the table, and you can either buy your kid dinner for the night, or you can buy your kid a vaccine, you're going to provide your kid dinner and you're going to hope that everybody else is getting vaccinated so that your kid doesn't suffer. But when enough people aren't able to get vaccinated, that's when we're really going to have disease emergence of things that have long been eradicated. You know, not just measles, but we're talking about mumps, we're talking about rubella, we're talking about paralytic polio. So it's really dangerous.
Yeah,
And
so
then
those are the people that maybe they don't have private insurance. So these are, again, go back to our Medicaid or access, if they can even access it, if they're doing their every 6 months, as if a mom of 3 kids who's a single mom doesn't already have enough to do, let alone reapply for her and her 3 kids every 6 months. But yeah, that makes sense. So then it's not going to be, do you think that private insurances will more than likely still cover it? Because they're like, come on, do they really want to have to pay for people that get measles? Like, that's not going to be cheap for them. That seems like it would be a smart thing to just say, it's not required, but we're going to make that recommendation.
Yeah, you would hope so. And, you know, we have conversations with insurance companies. And so it's like this big scam with the anti-vaccine community. They say vaccines are money makers, you know, physicians are getting paid, they're getting kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies. They're not. That's illegal to get a kickback from a pharmaceutical company to use a product, including vaccines. So it's just it's a
Probably shaking
bold-faced
their head.
lie.
Right.
But yes, vaccines are a cost saver for insurance companies because to care for a patient who is sick with a vaccine preventable disease is much more expensive than giving them a vaccine. So the hope is that private insurance companies will still cover vaccines with no cost sharing to patients. However, the real danger zone, I think, is for these very rare diseases. That's where it might get iffy for an insurance company because they might say, well, for example, meningitis. Meningitis, very, very deadly. I mean, Kaveh can tell you, if you come in with meningitis, you have hours before you need to get appropriate care. And even then, it might not be enough to prevent you from dying or serious illness. But it is rare. So if
I actually have a friend who had meningitis and almost died. So it's rare,
Yeah.
but it happens.
Yeah.
But it's rare. So that's the danger zone where insurers might look at a cost benefit analysis and say, I don't know if we're going to cover it, or I don't know if we're going to cover it for free because it's so rare. But if you're a person who gets meningitis, that's meaningless to you because you don't want to be the victim of that cost benefit analysis, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I have one thing to interject just about measles in particular. So my daughter is 2 years old. She's had 1 measles shot. And at her latest pediatrician appointment, my pediatrician said, you might want to consider doing the booster early. They get one at 4, but given what's going on in the community, and like you said, my daughter goes to a preschool and we don't know whether or not anyone has a religious exemption at that preschool, but there could be unvaccinated kids in the preschool. And so my pediatrician said, you really should consider getting that booster early. And my question was, well, okay, but will my insurance cover it if I do it early, if I do it outside of the schedule of when they say they should do it? So I had to call. It took me like almost an hour to get an answer on that. And that is, yes, they will, but it's case by case basis. So just the barrier that we're putting up for people who do want to vaccinate their kids. I mean, I have the time to do that. Not every mom has the time to do that. And having the bandwidth to make that decision for their kid might feel like, oh, what's the big deal? I'll just wait for 2 years. Then you have an issue in the preschool. And I mean, it's just, yeah, so catastrophic. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
That's exactly
Ashley,
right.
we're so grateful you came on. Thank you so, so much. So great that you're in our community. Dr. Najafi, we appreciate you too.
Thank you.
And before it gets too late, we are going to switch over and invite our wonderful City Councilwoman, Solange Whitehead. Some of you I know are not in Scottsdale. Don't think we will be offended if you need to jump off. Though I will tell you, the shenanigan bullshit that's happening in Scottsdale is probably in many ways also happening in your own city council. So you're welcome to stay on and join us and hear about that. So Solange, thank you so much for joining us. Real quick, can you, because some people on here are not as informed, can you give us a breakdown of how many people are on the city council and their let's say their political affiliations?
They're not supposed to. It's supposed to be nonpartisan. So
Oh,
thank
that's
you.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Shay. It was great listening to Ashley and Dr. Najafi. So there's 7 of us on council, a mayor and 6 council members, and I want to give a shout out to Councilwoman Marianne McGowan, my new best friend on council.
She is
here
on here. Thank you, Marianne. She's
somewhere on
joining
the
us.
Zoom. And you know, cities play a critical role in this healthcare puzzle too, because our job is to protect the public, and also cities, when run correctly, are great equalizers. So what we try to do is provide the same level of services to every kid. So we just opened a new playground, an indoor playground. My role was to make sure every kid could afford it, keep the price way down. I think it's $5. So, and I will also shout out that the city of Scottsdale has an especially close relationship with Honor Health, which is unusual, and that's also delivering better care. And I won't go into that. So yes, like that, at what we're seeing at the national level, we're seeing this extreme ideology get put in, take priority over just essential city services, what cities do. And the city of Scottsdale as a community, we're pretty broad, and we've always sort of been practical, resident driven, expecting the best. And now what we're seeing is this very narrow, again, this ideology driven, kind of taking away programs that we've had for generations. And so I just want to explain a current problem, which is something you probably don't know, but you may have voted on. The cities are required to have a general plan. And a general plan is just a roadmap of what we want the city to be over the next 10 years and what is important. And the reason, even though a general plan is not a mandate, the reason it's important is it provides us with the justification, us being city council, to have a program that provides, maybe we bring a vaccine truck into a park. And it gives us the guidance that we can then prioritize the environment, prioritize education, and prioritize feeding people, less fortunate people. And so when you change the general plan, that's the first way you chip away at ordinances, at programs, at priorities that we all care about. And this is a voter-approved document. So we have a city council that, much like the White House, either doesn't know, doesn't care, or both about how law and order and how governments are supposed to be run. So they are currently working to change your general plan to remove that's hundreds of changes, but to remove sustainability and diversity priorities. And that's how you then start to take apart the programs that have, again, made us prosperous for 50 years. So what I am encouraging people to do is to recognize that, unlike Congress, cities do get influenced by the public. You know, when Congress robs from us, it's kind of like highway robbery at midnight. City council, oh no, it's, we're right here midday, we're watching the council rob us. So we really have had a lot of successes, even though I'm the minority on council. So I am encouraging all you lovely ladies today to, if you would like to weigh in, And just with a simple message to my colleagues, to the city council, it's one email to say, keep your hands off our general plan. This is our priorities, our vote, and you can't change it. Email me, and I'm providing talking points to people who are interested in these priorities, sustainability and diversity specifically. So Shay knows how to get a hold of me. And again, we have had a lot of successes because our community is very educated, very engaged, and we expect exceptional city governments, and that's not what we're getting now.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love for a moment, since we are lucky enough to have Mary Ann McAllen on, Councilwoman.
Yes.
If she hasn't had to jump off, let's bring her in and just give her a chance to introduce yourself, if you would, Mary Ann.
Oh, thank you, Shay. It was great to hear Dr. Najafi. I was waiting to hear that. Solange and I were meeting this morning already. So thank you, Marianne McAllen, councilperson. I'm kind of, Solange is she's kind to say I'm her new best friend, but she's really acting as a mentor, helping me understand. I'm kind of a positive, everything's great until you hit a wall type person. And Solange is educating me and really helping me understand the ins and outs. But like she said, if you've been reading the articles in the newspaper over the last few weeks, each of the individual articles about each council person, you kind of get an idea of what we're dealing with. But the reality right now is the general plan, which is voted on by the citizens, not by us. And they're trying to change it. And that's not good, which means they don't want to have, it's exactly what's happening on a national level. Citizens thought they voted for this, but this is what you're getting. And they're trying to do the same thing. And it's not okay.
So it's a nonpartisan elected position. However,
Yes.
there are the two of you that just happen to be Democrats. And then there is 3 Republicans who you guys don't have to say it, though I think you're fiery enough to say it. They are MAGA as MAGA come. And they jumped in on day one that they were elected into office. They jumped right in and did away with our diversity, equity, inclusion office efforts that, when you drive down and you used to see, the Persian cultural festivals that we used to have, or different things like that the city is a part of to bring a culture into our community. That's going to be no longer. Those things aren't going to be happening anymore. And so it was day one that they immediately started to attack and dismantle diversity, equity, inclusion programs. Of course, that inclusion also includes handicap accessibility and efforts in that way, deaf and hard of hearing. And then they've moved over to the sustainability plan, which is really just an overall guidance of how we want to see our city form and care about the environment, and also care about keeping temperatures down, maybe planting some trees, a little less concrete, some things that are going to make it so that we can continue to use our the beautiful green belt. And so these ladies have been working their tail off. It is not a fun time to be serving, but it is absolutely the most important time to be serving. So we're so grateful to you. I will say they often come to our happy hours, our Scottsdale Women Rising happy hours, which actually happens to be next week. I hope you guys will be joining us. If you get our newsletter, which I think most of you do, you will now because you've registered. So you're on it now. You will be getting the invite to the happy hours. And many of you guys know we have an age restriction on that. And that is because we are really working to try and build up this community of the next generation of politically engaged activists. And the 40-something-year-olds tend to not show up. And so we're working really hard to change that. However, if you are outside of that age of 60, 65, we invite you to come. We just ask you to also bring someone in our age bracket so that that you can be a part of the cause and help us so that we can build up those next leaders, because the baby boomers have been carrying the heavy load for decades, and it's going to take every one of us to save this country. And so hope you guys will be joining us. Solange, did you have one last thing to share?
I want to say one thing about sustainability. Listen, first of all, we have known for 50 years in this town that our environment is our economy, and there are really no technological barriers to solving the issues, the heat, the water shortages. We have political barriers. So I just want everybody to keep hopeful, because climate change is a challenge but it's also the biggest opportunity to make sure our young people have incredibly good jobs. And when there is a problem, there's innovation. And we saw a lot of that. We've hit a wall with Trump and all his all the Trump wannabes, but we'll get past this, and as a nation, we can solve these problems, and we can make sure that our children have a good future.
And we are lucky enough that Solange will be running for office again. I'm sure I'm working a little bit on. There is one of my best friends, Amy Cardella, is definitely working on her campaign. So I will be working on it in my own ways as well. And I'm sure you'll be launching soon. And so we will be supporting Solange, absolutely. As well as Ethan Nolden, who you guys will eventually get to meet, who's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I think Solange and Mariana would agree. And that we're out of time, but I'm so grateful. We had such a great audience today and so many great speakers. Again, I think you guys can see why I wanted to start off with a win with Beth Lewis. It was gonna get heavy. So I said, let's celebrate a win here. So let's move into this day with more knowledge, but also knowing that there is battles that we are winning and there are things that we can do. And a reminder real quick, as far as what we can do for City Council, we got to tell you guys over and over again, op-eds. Writing op-eds and submitting op-eds. It is free advertisement. I mean, it is free advertisement for a cause or a candidate that you want to support. So it can be daunting to some people to think about getting something published. It's really not. It's like under 300 words. If you're passionate, you could write it in 1 hour. Jennifer McDowell writes it with her thumbs in about 5 minutes. There's a lot of ghostwriting for some different individuals, but we would love if you guys, if there's a topic, especially in regards to the city and others, please consider. We will guide you. We will tell you who the people are that you need to get those to, the editors, and let's get writing, guys. That is powerful. So thank you for joining us. And in 2 weeks, we have our Troublemaker Chat. It's very different than this. We don't have a guest speaker. It is come one, come all. And let's talk. It's just a Troublemaker Chat. What are you working on? What can we help you with? What are we working on? What do we need your help with? So join us in 2 weeks. Again, you'll see those in the newsletter. So thank you all for joining us.
Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Welcome, Sarah. Yes.
Thank you, guys.
See you
That was
soon.
wonderful.